Baby, I'm from New York, concrete jungle where dreams are made of. There's nothing you can't do. Now you're in New York.
Welcome to episode 3 of Jumping Into the Unknown. And this episode I promise to make you feel brand new. My big words are sure to inspire you. We're off to the concrete jungle where dreams are made of to find out what really happened in New York City. That's not a secret I'll never tell. You know you love me. XOXO.
3, 2, 1, let's go.
Hey, here we go. Up and Adams, Upper East Siders. Come on in, sit down, relax, put the feet up. I've got the kettle on and a story to tell. It's Shane here, your one and only source into the scandalous shenanigans that took place over the past 12 months. You gotta love a little bit of gossip, girl. This episode is a little special to me. It's one that's close to my heart because it's not too long ago since I left New York due to the terrible COVID-19 that has gripped the world. But before I go any further, I know there's going to be people listening out in New York, friends of mine. So I just want to say, please stay safe out there. To all the frontline staff that are working their ass off to kill this terrible virus as well, which essentially brought one of the busiest intersections on the planet to a standstill. We thank you, we applaud you for your work, and just stay safe. And hopefully we can reunite again very, very soon by staying apart in the meantime. Right, okay, where do I start? I suppose the best place to start is to start. Let me take it back to 2019. Wow, okay, what a year. Without a doubt, the fastest and most unpredictable year of my life so far, and I wouldn't change a minute of it. Let me take you back to when I first found out I was going to New York City, because this in itself would have scared a lot of people, having your whole plans just been turned upside down a week before you're due to fly. I wasn't supposed to go to New York at all. All this just happened, which makes it even more crazier. If you listened to my second episode, A Ticket to LA, I talked about living in Los Angeles and how I got set up there by some of the nicest people along the way. And it took me a good 6 months, which was pretty much the duration of my stay there, to get settled in. And I was settled in, and I was all set to go back to Los Angeles after Christmas, because I came home Christmas 2018. I had a series of gigs and different events and all that, so I stayed home for a couple of months. It was March before I got going again, the end of March. So I booked a flight for the end of March 2019. I did what I always did. I used to go from Shannon to Boston on to Los Angeles, where I essentially had built up a bit of a life for myself for the last 6 months. But remember, I talked about how you always must stay ready and ready for the obstacles and ready to jump into the unknown. I talked about it in episode 1 and 2. And boy, did that backfire, because it was almost like the universe said, nope, that's not where you're going. You, my friend, are going to the Big Apple. 4 days before I was due to fly from Shannon to Boston, I got an email from the airline, Norwegian Air, and they said, unfortunately, due to some air traffic control or some bullshit like that, your flight number, whatever it was, has been changed. See the details below. And I was like, what? So I clicked into the attachment. And when they said the flight has been changed, they meant it was a completely different flight. Like what was supposed to be Shannon to Boston now turned out to be Dublin to Newark in New York. So this meant that I had to fly to New York. I had to hop on a bus to Port Authority, transfer there and get a bus from Port Authority to Boston at 12 a.m. at night so I could finally get my connecting flight to LA. I'm like, yeah, fuck that. Thanks, but no thanks. So here I am 3 or 4 days out from my trip, and my whole plan has just gone tits up. Hence the reason I don't do plans. All I knew that was come Friday I was going to be on a plane to New York, so I think it was about time I started accommodation, had some sort of roof over my head. Most, if not all, of the 670 hotels in New York City were well overpriced at a price of about 2 return flights. So I was like, not going to happen. Absolute madness. But then again, it's New York, so that was out. I didn't really have much experience with hostels. I've never used them in the past, so I tend to kind of avoid them at all cost, even though they work great for people. I've had friends who use them and have great success out of them. Just for me, I never did in the past, so I kind of had to look back when I was in LA in a similar situation. If you listen to A Ticket to LA episode 2, I talked about like what to do when you find yourself stuck in this situation where you don't know anyone and you have no place to stay, and you kind of rely on the Irish out there to, I suppose, help one of their own. So I started messaging Irish pages and housing pages and different groups on Facebook, just with the simple plea for a room or a couch or somewhere to lay my head until the daylight, so I could essentially regroup, because there was no way I was jumping on a bus from Port Authority to Boston at 12:30 at night for 4 or 5 hour bus journey. Nah, fuck that. So Boston was out, and I had very little time to think about what was happening next. I just knew I was going to New York, and I suppose now that the flight from Boston to LA was cancelled, I had no time frame, but I didn't know what was happening. I just knew I was going to New York. And it was at that moment where I was like, okay, do I give it a go here, or do I just stay the night and book a flight tomorrow? And that's where it all really changed. So I was 2 days out and the flight to New York was fast approaching, and I swear it's like I had no control over any of this. Like, it's almost like the universe just set a path for me and told me to just trust the process. Literally, I received a message from someone who I reached out to who had a spare room in their apartment for 2 weeks. They had someone coming over in 2 weeks' time, but until they came over, the room was mine. I was like, oh, thank God, 2 days, here we are, lovely. Finally have a place to stay. That's that obstacle covered. At least I got a roof over my head for the night anyway. So I took them up on their offer, I took the room and I took the flight to New York. It was late when I got in that night. All the keys were left out for me with little notes directing me to the room. Super cute, like, and I remember thinking, like, whoever these people are, thank you. You know, like, they're good people. And I will mention their names because they went on to play massive roles in my time in New York. Aoife and Carl, they're the first two people I met. Sinead came a little later on to complete the team then. But obviously, I didn't sleep well that night, you know, being in a new city and all. It was very out of my comfort zone. I remember I woke, and I'll never forget this, I woke at 4:42 a.m. And I was just lying there. You know when you're lying there thinking and your mind is racing, or you have so many different thoughts going through your mind, or you're just uneasy. I couldn't settle myself at all. I don't know what's that due to the jet lag or the time difference or whatever it was. But anyway, I was started to really consider staying here in New York. And that surprised me a lot because I loved LA and I set myself up there. I told everyone that I was coming back after Christmas. And just because I had this little detour, it wasn't changing anything when I was going to New York. I knew I was going to go to LA. So to get these thoughts at that hour of the morning, I don't know, was I dreaming or what was going wrong with me? But something was telling me to stay in New York and to give it a real shot, at least for 2 weeks. And if nothing happened after 2 weeks, I can fall back on LA. So I woke up in the morning and that's essentially what I did. I think it was because I was addicted to that. I was addicted to jumping into the unknown, to just trying to make things work, starting in a new city where you have no connections. And because I'd done it in LA and worked so hard to doing it, I'm like, I can try it again here in New York City. Boy, was it fucking different. New York is a whole different pace. It's a whole different ball game. New York and LA are two different animals, and that's a whole episode for itself. But I made a promise to myself there and then that I give it 2 weeks, all out, like go all out. Don't even think about LA. All out for 2 weeks, trying to make it work, make the connections that would allow me to stay there. So I got up the next morning, as I say, up and Adams, Upper East Siders, and I went around New York with resumes and, you know, looking for gigs and meeting people at coffee. And I think that's when I called back home and I told Mom that I was like, I'm going to stay here for 2 weeks just to see how it goes. She was telling me that she knew people who she went to school with, who were living out there, and suggested I meet up with them and introduce myself. So I reached out to them and I did that, and God knows what would have happened if I didn't, because they helped me so much to get on my feet. They were the two main people that got me up and running. The two mics, I call them, and I won't get too personal for privacy reasons, but they helped me a lot and they know who they are. So grateful for that. And that's something to think about in itself. Like, you know, if you're moving to a new city where you don't know anyone, you need to look to friends or family or far out cousins. There's always someone like somewhere that will meet you for a coffee or lunch and show you the ropes, or in my case even go above and beyond and really make you feel welcome to a city so big and so diverse that you can feel so lonely at times. So definitely looking, especially New York, there's always someone in New York, in a city that was essentially built by the Irish. There's so many Irish in New York City that can help. Everyone knows someone, and it's just for that reason you never really feel alone, even if you don't know anyone. I knew things were going to work out when it only took me 3 days to get my first gig outside of the ones I had already booked. It was happening the first Friday that I got there at the Chelsea Bell in Lower Manhattan, and that turned into a regular Friday night slot. So immediately I had something in concrete. You know, I had a first block laid on the foundation that I had a regular slot every Friday night. And if you think about it this way, over the course of the month, that would have paid my rent. So that allowed me to stay there in terms of paying rent anyway. That allowed me to live there. But was I able to sustain a comfortable living there? That was something that would unfold over the next couple of weeks. Like, New York, as you'd imagine, is a very expensive city. It's not an easy city by any means. It's a fun city with money in your pocket, but it's not an easy city. And it's true what they say, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And that's not, I don't necessarily mean that by getting to the top. I just mean that by, if you can sustain a comfortable living there, get back up when it hits you in the face, you know, keep up with the aggressive pace of the city and interact with the different cultures and nationalities and the vibes that each of the 5 boroughs bring with them. If you can manage that for a year or so, then you can essentially bring those skills and live anywhere. I think that's what they mean by that saying. So now that I had that regular Friday night in Manhattan, that gave me some little bit of stability, but I needed to grow and expand that in order to, I suppose, sustain a comfortable living there. This is where I could have ran into a little bit of a hiccup, because it was mid-month and I wasn't able to move into a new apartment until May 1st. You generally just move in on the 1st of the month. It's a lot easier rather than messing mid-month. So I was kind of back to square one, where I didn't know where to go for 2 weeks. And thankfully I'd made such a good connection with Carl and Aoife, and when Sinead came over, thankfully she turned out to be just as welcoming and as warming as Aoife and Carl. So they all invited me to lunch and dinner and drinks, and they essentially offered me the couch for the remaining 2 weeks of the month. And again, that's what I mean, like the hospitality and the love from one Irish person to another just makes you feel so grounded, and it reassures you that things are going to work out, you know. For the remainder of the 2 weeks that were left before I moved out, you know, myself and the three girls, we used to do everything together, like going out and lunches and Brooklyn Bridge and seeing all the touristy shit. They essentially became my best friends. So moving away from that was kind of tough, because I was moving into a house where I didn't know anyone again. And a different area as well. I was moving to Sunnyside, a very quiet area, residential, nice area, but a little bit too quiet for my liking, after coming from Astoria and Queens. Astoria was the only place I'd known, and I suppose coming from a small town in Ireland to one of the biggest cities in the world, it was nice to kind of feel that sense of community again, and Astoria just did that for me. You know, it's one of the safest neighbourhoods. Traditionally, it's a big Greek spot, but the Irish are taking over. And just the small things, like every day when I left the apartment, you know, you see some familiar faces, whether it's in the gym, the coffee shop, you know, all the local bars who welcomed you with open arms. Just the little things in a big city means a lot. So leaving that to a new area in New York was almost like starting all over again, and with new roommates that I didn't know. I remember going to view the house, and it was just this big empty room, no beds, no furniture, no nothing. And this was the first time ever I had anything to deal with that. And I was like, well, okay, I gotta go and buy a bed and all that, even though I wasn't too keen with the area. And looking back, I'm like, thank God I didn't buy a bed. I didn't actually buy a bed. I bought a mattress for the first couple of weeks, because I was still looking for new places. You know, I wasn't gone on Sunnyside, and I kind of, my heart was set on Astoria, so I wanted to come back. Thankfully, I only had a mattress and a suitcase, so I didn't have much carrying around to do. I moved a lot throughout New York, 3 times to be precise. I moved house 3 different times throughout the year, so that was a lot of moving around, and thankfully I only had, as I said, a mattress and a suitcase. That's the thing as well with travelling, is just to travel light. I know it's particularly not easy probably for guys who might just have a suitcase with them. You know, the girls who obviously have their wardrobe and their 60 pairs of shoes with them might not be as easy, but definitely travel light is recommended. So once I got back to Astoria, that was where I made home for the next couple of months. And that brings me on to my next point, which was to find a bar, find somewhere I could go on my night off to network or to make some more friends. And thankfully there was a lot within like a 5-10 minute walk in Astoria. Like the Wolfhound is the main one there, Rory and all the boys. Like the nights we've had in there has been sick. And you know, down the street then you've got Judy and Punch and Sweet Afton, and these are nice little bars that I go. But if I wanted to go across the bridge into Manhattan, I went to East 34th Street to the Long Hall, and the Long Hall became my local. That's where the friendships expanded, and I met people from all over Ireland, and even all the crew in there, like, you know, Paul, Chris and Johnny and Neve. You know, Neve's just the friendliest, bubbliest character you're ever going to meet, and they're just the nicest people, and they just make you feel so welcome. So I found myself going in there a lot to make friends. That's where, as I said, the friendships expanded, and I essentially met some of my best friends in New York from there. So it didn't take long before I had a nice circle of friends, and I met one of my best mates, John. You know, we just clicked. Like, he looked after me, having known the different parts of the city, and he was living there longer than me. He knew where to stay away from and where to go to, and you know, his guidance throughout that year over one too many pints has just made memories for both of us for life. You know, he was that lad that I could just text if I felt down or I felt lonely in the big city. You know, we one texted John saying, "What are you at?" That was all sorted, and there was no more thought of it, you know. So it was all good and well meeting new people and expanding my friendships and stuff like that. But I only had the Friday night slot, so I had to expand and get more gigs if I was to stay there. Every Irish person I met, whether it was in the Long Haul or in the Wolfhound in Astoria, wherever it was, they were all had the same message, and it was like, have you got on to Patrick Green? Have you messaged Patrick Green? I was like, who's Patrick Green? He was like, he runs events. He's from Sligo. He's out here for years, doing very well for himself. He runs an events company. You should get on to Patrick Green. I was like, okay, I'll get on to Patrick Green. So I messaged Patrick. I DM'd him on Instagram, and I just told him who I was and what I did. And he was like, yeah, bro, come out with us this Friday. We're going to PhD. I've got a table in a nightclub if you want to come and hang out with us. And I was like, sounds cool. I'll see you there. So I was like, yes, right. So I went into PhD after my gig Friday night. And I mean, the VIP treatment was next level, like skipping the queues, walking into the hottest club in New York City, the view of the skyline, even where the table was right next to the DJ. It was just, I was introduced to this whole different world, which is really, really cool. And Patrick brought me down to the table anyway, introduced me to all the guys. And what was even more surprising was one of the lads from home was there as well. I was like, what are you doing out here? And he was like, what are you doing here? So we just connected instantly. Long story short, myself and Patrick got chatting and just became friends, and he invited me out again the following week. And before I knew it, he gave me a trial at hosting the different events. And shortly after that, I found